My name's Jo Mylan. I'm a research fellow at University of Manchester's Sustainable Consumption Institute. The SCI is an interdisciplinary research institute which addresses questions of sustainable consumption and production and how we can transition to a more sustainable society. We recently organised a workshop as part of the ESRC Festival of Social Sciences to look at issues around addressing the meat problem. Meat consumption and the production of meat puts a massive environmental pressure on the world. Many social science disciplines are already looking at how to address the meat problem, but they all look at the problem in a slightly different way and ask different types of questions. That's why it's interesting to get social sciences around the table that are looking at a similar empirical phenomenon, but from a slightly different conceptual perspective. There won't be just one solution to this problem. Is that actually we need to understand all of these things to be able to understand where things need to be changed and how they can be changed. And that's why we need this kind of interdisciplinary conversation around what to do about more sustainable food systems in general and meat consumption in particular. So the aim was to bring together academics with third sector organisations and commercial organisations and governance organisations to start a conversation about what the role of social science research could be in addressing this problem. And I'm going to suggest that actually the fact that there is a bit of confusion just shows that people are getting the messages from different places. This study shows that people are responding to a general feeling of unease, and so that's actually enough to make people change. So we need to stop thinking so much about getting the message exactly the same, and also that some interpretive flexibility, that we call some kind of difference of opinion about what the problem is, actually helps because it gets more people around the table to talk about it. We all might think the problem's slightly different, but we're all here to mobilise our resources and our minds and our time and our money around solving a problem. So it doesn't matter so much that we don't all agree. We had people talking about changing role of meat in diet in the UK and also in China.
It's a table of UK meat consumption, which has been relatively stable the last 10 years. But still, the UK diet, when in simulation studies where they sort of try to measure what would happen if the average diet was reduced by this and that, studies show that that would have a very relevant and significant effect on decreased greenhouse gas emissions. So it's still higher than it should be.
It's important to reflect, I think, for a moment on the symbolic values afforded to meat in the Chinese context. So the meanings of different types of meat have varied across different dynastic periods, but meat has always maintained a symbolic value in terms of celebration and ceremony, as well as being associated with social status and position.
People talking about strategic efforts to try and shape meat consumption, so whether that's at an institutional level through schools or government intervention.
What does this have to do with meat? Well, in recent years, meat and livestock have come on the radar of Silicon Valley as one of these big global problems. So this has led to some of the biggest names in big tech declaring that meat, dairy and eggs are ripe for reinvention or disruption, and that technology is the mechanism that we need to use to do that disrupting.
And then we also had another stream of research which was being presented about alternatives to meat.
So this is the Insecta range of insect-based convenience foods that's been sold in the Netherlands since 2014. These are effectively plant-based meat replacer type products. The crucial difference being they contain 14% ground-up buffalo worms.
There's lots of research that exists. How do we pull that all together into one place to make the key messaging very easy to find firstly and then digest secondly, especially as we present that to the likes of non-government organisations, government ministers, and I know in Manchester they're talking about policy making in relation to meat reduction. Those kind of documents of bringing research together and driving that understanding will be very useful.
What I would like to talk more today is how can we take collective actions? Do you think that this is a national government issue? Is this a local authority issue? What do you think that Manchester City Council, the combined authorities, should be doing about it? And how do we work with changing the behaviour, but also raising awareness of our residents? Thanks very much for listening.
On Quorn, we're doing a lot of work into the performance delivery of plant-based diets in athletes, but likewise we're also doing work with Imperial around digestion and satiety, so that as the conversation around meat reduction develops, we can be very clear on the academic work to prove the case for plant-based diets. WWF are quoting that by 2050 we're going to need 3 planets to live. Mainly because of population growth and the fact that if people adopt a Western-style diet, we're going to run out of resource. If I walk out into Manchester today and say, what are the contributors to greenhouse gas emissions? I imagine most people get to energy. I imagine most people get to transport. But I don't think they get to dinner for tonight.
There's been a lot of change in attitudes towards meat over the past decade. Eating Better was actually established in 2013 because so many organisations were talking about meat and the need to do something about it. And since that time it has moved up the agenda. We commissioned a YouGov survey of the British public earlier this year, and that found that 44% of people were thinking that were willing to reduce their meat consumption or had already reduced or cut their meat consumption. So it's a very positive basis for campaigning and for change.
Yeah, well, we've just commissioned a significant piece of research in which we're going to set animal consumption reduction targets. And we're doing this by getting the consensus opinion of 75 of the world's leading climate change experts. And with these targets, we're going to take that round to government policymakers, to companies, to other environment NGOs, to public institutions, schools, hospital, prisons, to sign up to and adopt these targets, because they're not targets that we're arbitrarily setting, they're independently set.
One of the reasons for doing an event like this is to try and shape ideas for future research. So we're not just looking backwards at what we've already done, we're looking forwards at what we can do in the future. Because some social scientists think that core to our existence is the fact that we're studying society in order to make a change for the better. One way in which we can make our research more useful is to engage with society from the beginning of the research process. So that was really an important reason for doing the workshop, to try and get some ideas of what direction we should be going in thinking about sustainable consumption and production.
Well, if you think I can summarize everything that we've spoken about today, good luck. I have about 10 to 20 pages of notes. Amazing stuff today, amazing ideas. So it's not just about consumption, and we're not just consumers. We're fully formed humans that have these very complex relationships to food and to meat. You think about research in media and climate change, what's the most successful? It's not telling you that you're destroying the planet, it's telling you how to fix your own behaviors that are the most successful and that people reply to. So I think in the context of meat eating, it's about giving people alternatives. One of the things I want to be cautious though about is this trap of responsibilizing consumers. So a lot of what we talked about today is how do we get consumers the right information to make the right choices? Well, that then means that we're responsibilizing them to make those choices. So how can we bring in other actors in the food system, companies, livestock producers, farmers, right? We need to think about the meat system much more broadly. So I'll just leave it there with that.
If anyone's got any ideas that they want to put forward, feel free to email them. Hopefully these conversations can carry on into the future.